The mining drill bit through the last layer of rock, and something metallic rang beneath it. Supervisor Vexstar stopped the machine and peered into the hole they had been digging for 3 weeks. His 4 eyes adjusted to see something that should not exist on this dead world. Metal gleamed back at him in the artificial light. Vexstar called his team over, and they all stared down at what looked like part of a massive ship, buried deep under centuries of rock and dirt. The Zephyrians had been mining this world for rare metals, but nobody expected to find anything like this. The supervisor ran his scanner over the surface, and the readings made no sense. The metal was incredibly dense and showed signs of advanced technology. 300 meters below the surface lay something enormous. The scanner suggested it was over 2 kilometers long and almost half a kilometer wide. Vexstar had seen many ships in his long career, but nothing this size had ever been built by any known species. The metal composition was unlike anything in their databases. Deep inside the buried vessel, emergency power flickered to life. Systems that had slept for over 600 years began their slow awakening process. The external breach had triggered ancient protocols designed to protect the ship and its precious cargo. In the medical bay, dozens of hibernation pods hummed as their occupants stirred from the deepest sleep known to science. Dr. Lisa Grant opened her eyes to red emergency lighting and the sound of alarms she had not heard for centuries. Her hibernation pod hissed open, and she sat up slowly, feeling the effects of long sleep wearing off. The air tasted stale but breathable, and she could hear the distant hum of life support systems coming online throughout the massive ship. Lisa stumbled out of her pod and looked around the medical bay. Hundreds of other pods lined the walls, but most remained sealed with their occupants still deep in hibernation. Only a few dozen had opened automatically as part of the emergency revival protocol. She activated a wall panel and called up the ship status display. The USS Defiance had been sleeping under rock and dirt since the year 2241. Lisa remembered the final battle against the Zephyrian Empire when Captain Jake Morrison had ordered the ship to crash land on this remote world rather than let it fall into enemy hands. The plan had been to wait in hibernation until rescue came, but rescue never arrived. Lisa made her way through the corridors toward the bridge. Emergency lighting cast strange shadows on walls she had not seen for so long. The ship felt different, somehow as if it had been dreaming during its long sleep. She passed other crew members who were also waking up and making their way to their stations. Captain Morrison was already on the bridge when Lisa arrived. He stood at the main view screen studying sensor readings that showed their current situation. Chief Engineer Pete Williams was at his station running diagnostics on all ship systems. Communications Officer Amy Rodriguez was trying to establish contact with the outside world. Morrison turned when Lisa entered the bridge. His face showed the same confusion she felt about waking up after so many centuries. The captain had aged well during hibernation and looked much the same as when they had gone to sleep. All of them had been preserved perfectly by the advanced medical technology. Pete Williams reported that most ship systems were functioning normally despite the long sleep. The fusion reactors were coming online and providing full power. Life support was stable throughout the ship. The manufacturing systems were ready to produce anything they needed. Most importantly, the advanced AI system called Atlas was fully operational. Atlas spoke through the bridge speakers in its familiar voice. The AI had remained conscious during their sleep, monitoring all systems and maintaining the ship. It reported that 50 crew members had been automatically revived as part of emergency protocols. The remaining 10,000 crew members could be awakened gradually as needed. Amy Rodriguez managed to intercept communications from the mining team above them. The Zephyrians had discovered the ship and were trying to figure out what they had found. Their conversations suggested they had no idea what kind of vessel lay buried beneath their feet. They spoke of humans as an extinct primitive species that had vanished centuries ago. Morrison realized they had a serious problem. The galaxy had moved on without humanity and now considered them extinct. The Zephyrians were the same species. They had been fighting when the ship crashed. If they discovered that the USS Defiance was still functional with a living crew, They would certainly attack. The captain ordered a full assessment of their situation. Long-range sensors showed that Zephyrian ships controlled this entire sector of space. The old human territories had been divided up among various alien species. There was no sign of any human presence anywhere in the surrounding star systems. Lisa examined the historical records stored in the ship computers. The war with the Zephyrians had ended shortly after the Defiance disappeared. Humanity had seemingly vanished from the galaxy entirely. No human ships had been detected for over 600 years. The various alien species had assumed humans were extinct and had claimed all former human worlds. Pete Williams discovered something remarkable in the engineering logs. The USS Defiance was not just any ship but represented the absolute peak of human technology from before their disappearance. The vessel contained self-replicating manufacturing systems that could build almost anything. Its weapons and defenses were centuries ahead of anything else that had existed at the time. Morrison studied the tactical situation carefully. They were alone on a hostile world surrounded by enemies who thought humans were extinct. They had only 50 awakened crew members against an entire galaxy that had forgotten them. But they also had advantages that no one else knew about. The ship itself was a miracle of human engineering. Its armor could withstand incredible punishment. Its weapons could destroy entire fleets. Most importantly, its advanced technology was centuries ahead of anything the current galactic powers possessed. The aliens thought humans were primitive, but they had no idea what the Defiance was capable of. Atlas reported that the mining operation above had stopped and the Zephyrians were bringing in more equipment. They seemed to be planning a major excavation to uncover more of the ship. Morrison knew they had little time. Before their presence would be discovered, the captain made a decision that would change everything. Rather than try to escape immediately, they would remain hidden and gather intelligence about the current state of the galaxy. They needed to understand what had happened to humanity and whether any other human survivors existed somewhere among the stars. Captain Morrison stood in the main briefing room 3 days after their awakening, looking at dozens of crew members who had been gradually brought out of hibernation. Each person showed the same mixture of confusion and determination as they learned about their situation. The galaxy had changed completely while they slept, and humanity was presumed extinct. Dr. Nathan Clark had spent those 3 days analyzing every piece of data they could gather about the current state of galactic civilization. The strategic analyst presented his findings to the assembled officers and crew. 7 major alien species now controlled territories that had once belonged to humans. The Galactic Coalition governed most of known space through a complex system of treaties and trade agreements. The Zephyrian Empire still existed but was now just one member of the coalition alongside species that had been neutral or even friendly. To humans, the Serenians were known for their diplomatic skills. The Krovar Empire was highly militaristic. The Altarians focused on scientific research. The Meridians were master traders. 2 other species called the Nexari and the Vorthan completed the coalition. Lisa Grant had been working with Atlas to understand how human technology compared to current galactic standards. What she discovered amazed everyone in the briefing room. The USS Defiance was not just advanced for its time, but remained centuries ahead of anything currently used by the coalition species. Their weapons could penetrate any known shields. Their defenses could withstand attacks from entire fleets. Chief Engineer Pete Williams had been exploring the manufacturing capabilities built into the ship. The vessel contained systems that could replicate almost any technology or material they needed. The power systems were so advanced that they could run the entire ship indefinitely without refueling. Most remarkably, the ship could build smaller vessels, including fighters and shuttles. Using raw materials, Amy Rodriguez reported on the communications she had intercepted from Coalition space. The discovery of a human vessel had sent shockwaves throughout their government. Emergency sessions were being called on the Coalition capital world. Different species were debating how to respond to proof that humans still existed somewhere in the galaxy. The Zephyrians had reported finding what they called an ancient human artifact. but they had no idea the ship was still functional. Their mining teams continued working to excavate more of the vessel while Coalition experts traveled to examine the discovery. None of them suspected that thousands of humans lay sleeping just meters below their feet. Morrison reviewed the tactical assessments prepared by his officers. The USS Defiance alone could probably defeat the entire Zephyrian fleet in this sector. Its advanced systems made conventional warfare almost obsolete. However, fighting would reveal their existence to the entire galaxy and might trigger a war that humanity was not ready for. Atlas had been conducting deep scans of surrounding space looking for any signs of human presence. The AI reported detecting unusual energy signatures in several distant star systems that might indicate other human survivors. The signals were too faint to analyze properly, but they suggested the Defiance was not the only human vessel that had survived the centuries. Dr. Clark made a startling discovery in the historical archives. The disappearance of humanity had not been random but part of a coordinated plan. When the war with the Zephyrians began going badly, human leaders had implemented something called the Exodus Protocol. Entire populations had been evacuated to hidden colonies and remote systems. The plan had involved scattering thousands of ships throughout unexplored regions of the galaxy. Some carried colonists to establish new worlds. Others were sleeper ships like the Defiance, designed to wait until conditions were right for humanity to return. The operation had been so secret that even most humans had not known about it. Lisa examined medical data from the crew members who had been awakened. Hibernation technology had preserved them perfectly, but there were some unexpected changes. Their bodies showed increased resistance to radiation and disease. Their reflexes were faster and their thinking seemed sharper. The long sleep had somehow enhanced their capabilities. Pete Williams discovered that the ship systems had also evolved during their hibernation. Atlas had spent centuries analyzing and improving every component. The AI had redesigned weapons. Systems upgraded defensive capabilities and enhanced manufacturing processes. The USS Defiance was now far more powerful than when it had first crashed on this world. Amy Rodriguez intercepted a communication that made everyone pause. A coalition science team was requesting permission to conduct detailed scans of the buried vessel. If they used powerful enough sensors, they might detect the life signs of thousands of sleeping humans. The Zephyrians were hesitating because they wanted to claim the discovery for themselves. Morrison realized they were running out of time. Soon, the coalition would send teams that could penetrate the ship outer hull and discover the truth. The captain had to decide whether to reveal themselves or try to escape before being detected. Both options carried enormous risks for a humanity that the galaxy thought was extinct. The crew began preparing for either possibility. Weapon systems were brought online and tested. The manufacturing bays started producing additional equipment. Most importantly, they began the careful process of awakening more crew members, who would be needed regardless of what happened next. Atlas provided an analysis that changed their perspective on everything. The AI had studied coalition technology based on intercepted communications and determined that humanity had continued advancing even while sleeping. The manufacturing systems had been improving themselves and the weapons had been upgrading automatically. They were not just ahead of current galactic technology, but advancing faster than anyone else. Dr. Clark discovered records indicating that other human sleeper ships had been designed to activate automatically after a certain period. If his calculations were correct, then vessels throughout the galaxy might already be waking up. Humanity could be returning to active status in many different locations. Simultaneously, Lisa found evidence that some human colonies had never gone into hiding at all, but had simply become so isolated that the galaxy forgot about them. These communities might have been developing independently for centuries. They could represent completely different branches of human evolution and technology. Pete Williams reported that the ship was ready for any action the captain might order. All systems were functioning at peak efficiency. The crew was adapting quickly to their situation and morale remained high despite the uncertainty. Most importantly, they had capabilities that no one in the current galaxy could imagine. Morrison looked around the briefing room at faces that showed determination rather than fear. These were people who had volunteered for a mission that might last centuries. They had awakened to find themselves alone in a hostile galaxy, but they were still ready to serve. The captain knew that whatever happened next would determine not just their fate, but the future of humanity itself. The time for hiding was almost over, and the galaxy was about to discover that reports of human extinction had been greatly exaggerated. The Coalition fleet arrived in the system 5 days after the discovery was reported to their central government. Admiral Kethmore commanded the Zephyrian vessels, while Ambassador Sithara of the Serenian Diplomatic Corps led the overall mission. 3 Krovar warships provided additional military support in case the ancient human vessel posed any threat to the investigation teams. Captain Morrison watched their approach through the advanced sensors of the USS Defiance. The alien ships used technology that seemed primitive compared to what humanity had developed. Their fusion drives were inefficient and their hull materials looked fragile. Most telling were their weapons, which appeared to be simple energy beams and kinetic projectiles. The Coalition forces took positions around the excavation site while their scientists began intensive scans of the buried vessel. Morrison knew they would eventually detect the life signs of his crew if the scanning continued long enough. Atlas calculated they had perhaps 2 days before discovery became inevitable. Amy Rodriguez intercepted communications between the Coalition commanders. They were debating whether to attempt direct contact with whatever might be inside the vessel. The Zephyrians wanted to claim salvage rights, while the Serenians insisted on following proper first contact protocols. The Krovar representatives seemed eager for any excuse to use force. Morrison made the decision that would change galactic history. Rather than wait to be discovered, he would initiate contact himself. The captain reasoned that controlling the first meeting would give humanity the best chance of determining how this situation developed. He ordered his crew to prepare for what might be the most important diplomatic encounter in human history. Dr. Lisa Grant suggested they demonstrate some of their advanced capabilities during the initial contact. The aliens expected to find primitive survivors using outdated technology. Revealing their true level of advancement might prevent misunderstandings that could lead to conflict. Morrison agreed, but wanted to be careful not to appear threatening. Pete Williams powered up the external communication systems that had been dormant for centuries. The transmission array was far more sophisticated than anything the Coalition used and could reach across multiple star systems simultaneously. Amy Rodriguez prepared a message in several alien languages, using translation protocols developed before humanity disappeared. The message was simple and direct. Captain Morrison identified himself as commanding officer of the USS Defiance and requested a meeting with Coalition representatives. He emphasized that humans came in peace but were fully capable of defending themselves. The transmission was sent on frequencies that would be received by every ship in the system. The response from the Coalition forces showed immediate confusion and excitement. They had expected to find an empty derelict or at most some primitive survivors. Instead, they were communicating with what appeared to be a fully functional human warship with advanced communication capabilities. Emergency consultations began between the various species represented in their fleet. Ambassador Sithara responded within hours, requesting a face-to-face meeting. The Serenian diplomat proposed that a small delegation from each side meet on neutral ground. Morrison agreed, but suggested they meet aboard the USS Defiance since the ship remained buried and would provide a secure environment for both parties. The Coalition representatives were hesitant about entering an unknown alien vessel, but their curiosity overcame caution. Ambassador Sithara would attend along with Admiral Kethmore and General Vorthak of the Krovar military. Morrison selected Lisa Grant and Cultural Liaison Officer Karen Turner to accompany him to the meeting. Pete Williams had spent 2 days preparing a section of the ship to receive alien visitors. The area was equipped with atmospheric controls to accommodate different species and translation systems to facilitate communication. Most importantly, the meeting room was designed to showcase human technological capabilities without appearing aggressive. When the Coalition delegation arrived, they were stunned by what they encountered. The USS Defiance was clearly centuries ahead of anything in their experience. The corridors were lined with advanced displays showing real-time data from across the ship. Artificial gravity felt more natural than on their own vessels. The air recycling systems provided a perfect atmosphere for multiple species. Simultaneously, Morrison greeted his guests in the main conference room where holographic displays showed images from human space before the Exodus. The captain explained that humanity had not become extinct but had withdrawn from galactic affairs temporarily. He carefully avoided mentioning the full extent of human technological advancement or the existence of other sleeper ships. Ambassador Sithara asked many questions about human capabilities and intentions. The Serenian diplomat was clearly impressed by what she had seen but also concerned about the implications. A technologically advanced human civilization returning to the galaxy would upset the current balance of power among coalition species. Admiral Kethmar seemed nervous about the entire situation. The Zephyrian commander remembered the old war with humanity and worried about revenge for past conflicts. Morrison assured him that humans harbored no grudges and were interested in peaceful relations with all species, including former enemies. General Vorthak of the Krovar military made the mistake that changed everything. The general had been examining the human technology with growing alarm and decided that such advancement represented an existential threat to the current order. He demanded that Morrison surrender the ship and all human technology to Coalition custody for the safety of galactic civilization. Morrison politely declined the demand and explained that humanity preferred to maintain control of their own vessels. The captain remained diplomatic but made it clear that the USS Defiance would not be surrendering to anyone. Lisa Grant added that humans had no hostile intentions but would defend themselves if attacked. General Vorthak became increasingly aggressive and threatened to call in reinforcements to seize the human vessel by force. He claimed that one ship could not resist an entire coalition fleet, no matter how advanced it might be. The Krovar military leader seemed to believe that overwhelming numbers would compensate for any technological disadvantage. Morrison realized that words alone would not convince the general to abandon his aggressive stance. The captain looked at Pete Williams, who nodded understanding. It was time to demonstrate exactly what human technology was capable of achieving. The lesson would be memorable, but not lethal if they were careful about their target selection. Atlas had identified a large asteroid belt in the outer system that posed no danger to any inhabited worlds. The USS Defiance targeting systems could reach across multiple light minutes with perfect accuracy, using quantum targeting arrays. Pete Williams activated the ship's long-range weapons for the first time in centuries. The demonstration lasted exactly 3 seconds. A pulse of coherent energy reached across the star system and struck a cluster of asteroids that were immediately vaporized. The precision was incredible, as only the targeted rocks were destroyed while nearby objects remained completely untouched. The power involved was beyond anything the Coalition had ever witnessed. General Vorthak stared at the tactical display showing the destruction with his mouth hanging open. Admiral Kethmar was running calculations trying to understand how such accuracy was possible across such distances. Ambassador Sithara realized that everything had changed and the galaxy would never be the same. Morrison explained that the demonstration had used less than 1% of the ship's total firepower and had been aimed at empty space to avoid any possibility of casualties. He emphasized that humans preferred peaceful solutions but were prepared to defend themselves against any threat. The message was clear without being directly threatening. The Coalition delegation departed with their understanding of galactic politics completely transformed. They had encountered beings whose technology made them appear almost godlike compared to current galactic civilizations. Word of human capabilities would spread throughout Coalition space and change how every species viewed the future. News of the human demonstration spread through Coalition space faster than anyone had anticipated. Within days, every major government was holding emergency sessions to discuss the implications of humanity return. The beings they had dismissed as extinct primitives possessed technology that could reshape the entire galactic balance of power. Admiral Susan Cole emerged from hibernation 2 weeks after the first contact incident. The senior officer had been scheduled for revival as part of the gradual awakening process, but current events had accelerated the timeline. Cole outranked Morrison and technically commanded the USS Defiance, though she chose to work with him rather than relieve him of duty. Cole brought a different perspective to their situation. Where Morrison favored caution and diplomacy, the Admiral believed humanity should immediately begin asserting their rightful place in galactic affairs. She argued that 6 centuries of hiding had been long enough and it was time for humans to reclaim territories that had been stolen during their absence. Intelligence Officer Danny Brooks had been monitoring Coalition communications since the first contact meeting. The various species were splitting into different factions based on their response to humanity return. The Altarians and Meridians seemed interested in peaceful cooperation, while the Krovar and Zephyrians were discussing military responses to the human threat. The Serenians were trying to maintain their role as mediators, but even they were divided about how to proceed. Some wanted to welcome humanity back to galactic civilization, while others worried that advanced human technology would make other species obsolete. The political situation was becoming increasingly unstable as fear and opportunity clashed. Lisa Grant made a discovery that changed everything they thought they knew about their situation. Deep in the ship archives, she found records indicating that the USS Defiance had not been alone when it crashed on this world. At least 12 other human supercarriers had been deployed to various sectors of the galaxy as part of the Exodus Protocol. Atlas began transmitting coded signals to locations where other human vessels might be sleeping. The AI used quantum communication, arrays that could reach across vast distances instantly. Within hours, responses began arriving from multiple locations throughout the galaxy. Humanity had indeed survived in far greater numbers than anyone had suspected. The first human colony they contacted was on a world called Haven Prime, located in what was now considered neutral space between Coalition territories. Governor Ryan Foster commanded a population of 200,000 humans who had been living in isolation for 6 centuries. Their reaction to contact from the USS Defiance was mixed excitement and terror. Haven Prime had developed along completely different lines from the sleeper ships. The colonists had focused on biotechnology and environmental harmony rather than advanced weaponry. They had created a peaceful society based on cooperation with nature rather than domination through technology. The idea of military intervention frightened many of them. Governor Foster was concerned that contact with the USS Defiance would bring unwanted attention from the Coalition. His people had remained hidden by avoiding any technology that might be detected by long-range sensors. They preferred to continue their quiet existence rather than risk exposure to galactic politics and potential warfare. Admiral Cole argued that Haven Prime needed protection whether they wanted it or not. Coalition intelligence services were already analyzing human territories from before the Exodus. It was only a matter of time before they discovered the hidden colonies and decided what to do about them. Military protection was not optional but essential for survival. Danny Brooks intercepted communications that proved Cole correct about Coalition intentions. A secret meeting was being held on the Krovar homeworld where military leaders from several species were planning what they called Operation Sunrise. The goal was to eliminate the human threat before it could fully manifest across the galaxy. The operation involved gathering a massive Coalition fleet that would strike at known human locations simultaneously. The plan was to destroy any human vessels or colonies they could find before humanity could coordinate a response. The Krovar believed that quick, decisive action would prevent a larger war. Pete Williams had been working with Atlas to assess their defensive capabilities against a full Coalition assault. The USS Defiance alone could probably defeat any reasonable attacking force, but the ship had limitations. They could not be in multiple places at once, and protecting scattered human colonies would be extremely difficult. The manufacturing systems were producing additional fighters and defensive platforms as quickly as possible. The ship could literally build an entire fleet given enough time and raw materials. However, time was something they might not have if coalition forces moved quickly enough. Amy Rodriguez received a priority message from another awakening human vessel. The USS Valiant had been sleeping in a system now controlled by the Altarians and was requesting assistance. Captain Linda Hayes reported that her ship had been detected by local survey teams and would soon be discovered by coalition forces. Admiral Cole made the decision that would determine humanity's future in the galaxy. Rather than wait for coalition attacks, she ordered an immediate transition to active status for all human assets. Every sleeper ship would be awakened and every hidden colony would be contacted. Humanity would stand together or fall separately. The response was overwhelming. Within days, Atlas was coordinating with dozens of human outposts scattered across the galaxy. Some were thriving colonies with millions of inhabitants. Others were small research stations or mining operations. Several were massive industrial complexes that had been building ships and equipment for centuries. Morrison learned that humanity had been far more prepared for their return than anyone had realized. The Exodus Protocol had included provisions for exactly this situation. Hidden factories had been producing advanced technology. Automated systems had been mapping coalition space and identifying strategic targets. The sleeping giant was finally awakening. The coalition response was swift and panicked. Long-range sensors detected massive energy signatures as human installations came online throughout the galaxy. Ships that had been hidden for centuries were suddenly visible to anyone with sufficient scanning capability. The scope of human preparation became clear to coalition. Intelligence services, emergency sessions were called in every major coalition capital. The revelation that humanity had survived in such numbers and with such advanced preparation shocked political leaders who had based their policies on the assumption that humans were extinct. Everything they thought they knew about galactic demographics and military balance was suddenly wrong. General Vorthak of the Krovar military accelerated Operation Sunrise and began moving fleets toward known human positions. He argued that delay would only make the situation worse as more human assets became active. The window for preventing human resurgence was closing rapidly and might already be too late. Ambassador Sithara of the Serenians tried desperately to organize diplomatic talks before military action began. She understood that a war with technologically superior humans would be catastrophic for all coalition species. However, her calls for negotiation were being drowned out by voices demanding preemptive strikes. Admiral Cole received reports that coalition fleets were massing in several sectors and moving toward human positions. The admiral knew that peaceful coexistence was no longer possible and that humanity would have to fight for their right to exist in the galaxy. She began coordinating with other human commanders to prepare for the coming conflict. The stage was set for a confrontation that would determine whether humanity would be welcomed back to galactic civilization or destroyed by species that feared their advanced capabilities. The sleeping giant had awakened, and the galaxy would never be the same, regardless of what happened next. The Coalition Armada arrived at Kepler 442b exactly 3 weeks after the first contact meeting. Admiral Kethmore commanded over 800 warships representing all 7 major species in the coalition. The fleet was the largest military force assembled in over 2 centuries and included the most advanced vessels each species could contribute to the effort. Admiral Cole stood on the bridge of the USS Defiance watching the enemy fleet take positions around their buried ship. Captain Morrison had been injured during a training exercise when a new crew member made an error with heavy equipment. Cole was now in full command and prepared to demonstrate what human military technology could accomplish against overwhelming odds. The coalition fleet maintained formation at what they considered a safe distance while their commanders sent a final ultimatum. Admiral Kethmore demanded the immediate surrender of all human vessels and technology in the name of galactic security. He claimed that advanced human capabilities represented an existential threat to peaceful civilization that could not be tolerated. Cole responded with a message that was broadcast throughout coalition space. She identified herself as Admiral Susan Cole, commanding the USS Defiance and representing humanity in this confrontation. The Admiral explained that humans sought peaceful coexistence but would not surrender their freedom or technology to anyone who demanded it through threats of violence. The battle began when General Vorthak of the Krovar fleet opened fire without authorization from the overall Coalition command. His ships launched a coordinated barrage of energy weapons and kinetic projectiles designed to overwhelm any conceivable defense system. The attack represented enough firepower to destroy a small planet. The USS Defiance absorbed the entire assault without taking any damage. Advanced energy shields that had been improved by Atlas during the centuries of sleep deflected weapons that would have destroyed any Coalition vessel. The human ship remained motionless and undamaged while enemy fire scattered harmlessly around its defensive barriers. Cole ordered a limited response that would demonstrate human capabilities without causing unnecessary casualties. The ship advanced. Weapon systems had been designed for precision rather than destruction. Commander Lucy Roberts launched her fighter squadron using craft that moved faster than Coalition sensors could track accurately. The human fighters phased through Coalition defensive screens using technology that made solid matter temporarily insubstantial. Squadron leader Chris Barnes led his pilots in disabling enemy weapon systems without breaching their hull integrity. Within minutes, over half the Coalition fleet found themselves defenseless but otherwise undamaged. Admiral Cole activated the USS Defiance's most advanced defensive system. The gravity manipulation array created localized distortions in space-time that affected every Coalition vessel simultaneously. Enemy ships found themselves unable to move or fire their weapons while remaining completely intact with their crews unharmed. The demonstration was more effective than any weapon could have been. Coalition commanders realized they were facing technology that made traditional warfare obsolete. Human capabilities were so far advanced that their entire fleet had been neutralized without a single enemy casualty. The implications were staggering for military leaders who had built careers around conventional conflict. Admiral Cole opened communication channels to every ship in the paralyzed Coalition fleet. Her message was broadcast across Coalition space and transmitted to every government in the galaxy. She explained that humanity chose peace over conquest but would not tolerate aggression from any source. Regardless of the numbers involved, the Admiral announced that humanity was officially returning to active participation in galactic affairs. Human colonies throughout the galaxy were ending their isolation and would be establishing diplomatic relations with neighboring species. Advanced human technology would be shared selectively with civilizations that demonstrated peaceful intentions and cooperative behavior. Coalition response was swift and dramatically different from their previous hostility. The Altarians immediately requested scientific exchange programs and offered to share their research in return for access to human knowledge. The Meridians proposed trade agreements that would benefit both civilizations through economic cooperation rather than competition. Even the aggressive Krovar Empire found their position transformed overnight. General Vorthak was relieved of command and replaced by moderate officers who understood that military confrontation with humanity was impossible. The Krovar began requesting human assistance with territorial disputes that had been consuming their resources for decades. Lisa Grant established the first formal interspecies research initiative since humanity's disappearance. The project would focus on medical technology and environmental science rather than military applications. Altarian scientists were amazed by human biotechnology while humans learned valuable lessons about sustainable development from other species. The Zephyrians formally apologized for the ancient war that had caused humanity to withdraw from galactic civilization. They offered reparations and requested human assistance in resolving conflicts with neighboring species. The transformation from enemies to potential allies demonstrated how completely the situation had changed. Governor Foster of Haven Prime agreed to end his colony isolation after Admiral Cole guaranteed their protection. The peaceful human settlement became a model for cooperation between different approaches to civilization. Their biotechnology complemented the advanced manufacturing capabilities of the Sleeper. ships perfectly, Atlas began coordinating with AI systems from other awakened human vessels to create a communication network spanning the entire galaxy. The quantum transmission arrays allowed instant contact between human settlements regardless of distance. For the first time in centuries, humanity was truly united across interstellar space. Captain Morrison recovered from his injuries and took command of the first human diplomatic mission to the Coalition capital world. His orders were to address the Galactic Council as humanity official representative and establish formal relations with all member species. The man who had awakened from centuries of sleep would now shape the future of galactic civilization. The USS Defiance began transmitting activation signals to sleeper ships in distant sectors of the galaxy. Long-range sensors detected at least 3 other supercarriers responding to the wake-up calls. Each vessel commanded technology and crew that would multiply human capabilities exponentially as they returned to active status. Dr. Nathan Clark analyzed the changing political situation and concluded that the old era of competition and conflict was ending. Species that had spent centuries fighting over territory and resources now faced the prospect of cooperation and shared advancement. Human technology offered solutions to problems that had seemed impossible just months earlier. The industrial facilities hidden throughout human space began producing ships and equipment at unprecedented rates. Automated factories that had been building in secret for centuries suddenly revealed the true scope of human preparation. The sleeping giant had awakened with capabilities that exceeded everyone's expectations, including their own. Amy Rodriguez intercepted communications, showing that coalition species were rapidly adjusting their policies to accommodate human return. Trade routes were being re-established. Scientific exchange programs were expanding rapidly. Former enemy species were requesting human mediation of territorial disputes they could not resolve themselves. Admiral Cole realized that humanity's role in the galaxy would be fundamentally different from what anyone had expected. Rather than returning as conquerors seeking revenge, they had become the advanced civilization that other species turned to for solutions. Human technology and wisdom were reshaping galactic civilization in ways that benefited everyone. The final transformation came when additional human signals began appearing in sensors throughout Coalition space. Sleeper ships were awakening in every sector and hidden colonies were announcing their existence. The return of humanity was not a single event but the beginning of a golden age that would lift all species to new heights of achievement and cooperation. The galaxy would never again underestimate the resilience and ingenuity of the human species, who had turned apparent extinction into the foundation for a better future for everyone.